Well, good morning. I hope your day is off to a good start. This morning we'll be talking with someone who has made their mark here at TV6 and is now moving on to a whole new career. We'll start that conversation right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, Vicky Crystal has been a very familiar face on the TV6 morning news for 16 years. While quite a few morning meteorologists and reporters have come and gone, Vicky has been that stable force that viewers have come to expect each weekday morning. Now she's preparing to embark on a very new and different career. This morning, I hope we can get to know her even better as we ask her to share some memories and also to look to the future. It's a pleasure to welcome Vicky Crystal to the Ryan Report. Vicky, nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Don. This is fun.
You know, it's not often you get to appear as a guest. Do you think this is going to work out okay?
I think it'll be all right.
Okay.
I could get used to this.
Okay. Well, let's go all the way back. Let's start with
Okay.
some early history. I want people to get to know you.
Sure.
You told me in a previous interview you grew up on a farm in Wisconsin. What was that all about?
You know, when my parents got divorced, my mom kind of wanted to make a fresh start, so we moved to Wisconsin. We knew no one there. Okay. And so it was very different, made a lot of really good friends. Farming was not for me. Okay. Some of the family really stuck with it. I did not, and decided that I was originally, though, because I did love animals, the original thought was to become a veterinarian. I thought, you know, I had the smarts for it and the skills, and it just never panned out. I wanted to be able to pay my way through college, so I thought, well, what could I do? So I went to a broadcasting school, Trans-American School of Broadcasting.
We should tell people what that is, because I'm not sure they still have those, but I suppose they do.
I don't know if they do. I went to the one that was in Wausau, and what Trans-American was, or any of the broadcast schools were at that time, you would take, it was a very short course, it was like 8 months long, and they taught you the basics, how to speak clearly, how to pronounce words correctly, how to write a story, how to prepare yourself to go on the air. You literally just learned what it was like to be on the air. You didn't have all these other extra courses or anything like that. No broadcast history, nothing like that. We learned how to talk on the air.
And they were fairly common back in those days and before.
Oh, yes.
Many people who went into broadcasting did go to a school first.
Sure did.
How did you find your way to Marquette County? How did that happen?
Well, it was actually through the school, because there was an opening at WJPD Radio, and it was still in Ishpeming at that time, and they were looking for somebody to do the evening shift and to write commercial copy, to write ads. Which was, it wasn't a great point for me, but I knew how to write an ad, get the basic point across, not too creative, but it was out there. So I came and I interviewed. I'll never forget, it was in January, and I didn't know there was a time change. So I was going to be at the station at 4 o'clock, but then I hit the line, the Marquette County line, went, oh, I just lost a whole hour. Oh no! So I was late for my very first interview, but they hired me anyway, and that was, and that's where I started to get to know the Upper Peninsula and the people in it.
Well, and about that, after you were here for a while, what were your impressions of being here on the Upper Peninsula, and specifically in Marquette County?
I really loved it. What a lot of people don't realize is how really fortunate this area is. Now, keep in mind, I loved my life in Wisconsin. It was fine, but we didn't have big plays. We had high school productions, but we had nothing like the college productions we have at both Tech and NMU. We didn't have, big concerts that came in, guest conductors from around the world. We had none of that. It was a little limited as far as options of things to do. One of the first impressions I had my first year of the Upper Peninsula was that every single weekend there's something to do. Every weekend. If you're not doing something, you're not looking. That's right.
You and I share something. We both started our broadcasting career at WJPD.
The big stick.
I think when I started, it was only 250 watts, and it was the AM radio station. So, you got to do one of the legendary shows in radio around here, Talk to us a little bit about telephone time, which many people will remember, but some may not.
I still have people who talk to me about telephone time. I was actually the last host for telephone time because when I left to come here, it was rapidly disbanded by the person who took my place. He did not like the show at all. You know, I had a love-hate relationship with it. I liked being able to help people, you know, buy, sell, trade, give away, look for items. But there was such an incredible amount of pressure. We only had a short period of time. And the phones would start ringing at like 10 minutes before the hour. And that was like 15 minutes before the show even started because he had a 5-minute news block in there. The phones would start ringing and they'd be like, could you put me on hold? And it's, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. We had 4 lines that connected into the studio. And I kid you not, you'd finish one, you'd hit the next button, and the first one would be ringing again. It was a lot of pressure to get that many phone calls. So there were times that I sounded very abrupt, but the administrative assistant who had to answer the phone calls afterwards, boy, people were not happy when they did not get on telephone time. So I tried to get as many people as I possibly could to, you know, get as many people on the air and give them that service. You know,
it's so popular, you wonder why it went away, but I suppose with the internet and all the rest of it.
Yeah, there were just easier ways to do it. And now with, could you imagine with a cell phone on your cell phone trying to keep dialing through and everything? The technology has changed a lot. And now instead of just having to call and describe it on the telephone, I can share a picture, like you said, right on whatever Craigslist or Facebook or whatever area you're using online.
And you and I also shared something else, and that is we both took a break from broadcasting. Did you kind of give up on it at some point?
It wasn't that. I sort of hit a point where I was feeling, I got really burned out badly, and needed to take that little bit of a break. When I walked away from WJPD for those few years that I went to work at one of the local credit unions, I really needed to recharge my batteries. And at first was like, I'm never going back. And then after a while, my attitude softened a little bit, and when they were looking to, you know, rehire people, it was a little bit easier to go back in.
Okay, and we'll kind of pick it up right there when we come back.
Sure.
We'll be back with more on today's Ryan Report after we take this 2-minute break. Guest this morning is Vicky Crystal, who you see every morning on the morning news here on TV6. Vicky will be leaving us in a while. We're going to talk more about that. Right now, how did you ever wind up here at TV6? We talked to you about your radio career. How did you get to television?
Well, it was interesting. I'd always done a lot of television with the MDA telethons, you know, and I had a great time doing it, was comfortable speaking on a microphone. And the production manager at the time, she had always joked, Karen had always joked, I'm going to get you on TV regular one day. It's like, Karen, I am not a television person. You have to dress up every day and wear makeup. I liked sweat clothes, you know. But there was a change of ownership at the radio station, and they were looking at making changes, and I had a gut feeling. They never came right out and said it because I left before they could. I had a gut feeling that it was either going to be, you know, shifting things around a lot or maybe just out and out being fired. I didn't know. So I had a long conversation with God on my way home and said, well, you know, what do you want me to do? You know, I'm open to do whatever. And I got home, and like 2 days later, I had a phone call from Karen, and she had told me that the morning on-air person at that time, Jody, was leaving, and would I like to come in and try for the job? I talked it over with Tom Feldhusen, who also used to work here at TV6, and Tom said, well, if you never try, you'll never know. So I said, well, I'll go give it a try. I came in, Ed Carney was the news director at the time, and Ed had me do a little air check. I didn't have one, so he put me on the desk, did a little reading on the air. We sat down, we watched it together, and he said, so what do you think? I said, well, Ed, I said, it'll never get worse than that. It'll only get better. It's like, well, here's the little form. Let's go get you hired.
So you were destined from the beginning to be the morning news person? Was that?
Yeah, that was the intent. I did train for a month as a reporter, got a deep appreciation for what the reporters do because they do a little bit of everything, but I was primarily hired on to be the morning anchor.
Now, the fact that you're on the air at 5 o'clock, people know that you work some unusual hours, but I'm not sure they know how unusual they really are. What's your typical day or night like?
Well, because the show starts at 5, in order to get ready, I normally get up at midnight, get up, get a little bit of food in me, get showered up and ready to come in. I'm normally in the station by about 1 a.m., provided there isn't a snowstorm. Yes. And then we're
and
just...
You can't just miss the news.
Oh, we can't just miss the news. No, it is one of those things, we have to do it.
Right.
And so I'm here by 1, and then I'm working with my producer right up until about maybe 4:20, and that's when I go in, put on my makeup, try to get my hair into some semblance of order, and get ready to go on the air.
And one of the interesting things has to be the number of different people you've worked with over the years, you know,
oh,
and
gosh.
just being here in the station, because I typically work a shift when the morning crew is around.
Sure.
So you get to know these people, and they're nice people, but then they move on.
They do, and I've seen some really great people come and go here. I've maintained, friendships with almost all of them. Some have fallen off, and that was partly my fault because I just didn't reach out and stay connected with them. But just an incredible group of people that have come and gone through here.
And some interesting, and meteorologists are always a little different, aren't they?
Yeah, well, and for me it was the meteorologist because that's who I worked most closely with. It was always, when I first started a 2-person show, it was the anchor and the meteorologist, and those were the 2 people on the air. What a lot of people don't realize is when you work in television, you're not asked who your co-anchor or who your meteorologist is going to be. That's not my decision. So I would very often meet these people after they've been hired, had done training. I get to shake their hand and go, well, in 3 days they'll be on the air with you. So in 3 days you have to get to know a person and forge some sort of common bond so that when you're on the air, you've got something to talk about. So it's a little quick.
And one of those people, Bill Roth, kind of beat you into the career that you're going to be pursuing in the future. And we'll talk more about that later. But
sure.
Bill was an interesting guy, wasn't he?
He was. Bill was, he's what they call a personality. And some people really love personalities and some people don't. I love Bill. He's a great guy. He's still a really good friend. But when you're a big personality, like I said, some people don't care for that. But I thought he was a wonderful guy. He was a good meteorologist too. Meteorology, you have to be very particular to attention. Right. And he is the most detail attention person I've ever met.
One thing people don't think about, but you have to put the news together every day.
Sure.
But does the news affect you at sometimes? Because you're dealing with things that are exciting and things that are sad, and
it can.
It's there. You're the person who has to report it.
Sure. Well, you can't talk about good things without feeling happy, and you can't talk about bad things without it bringing you down a little bit. There are, like in anything, whenever there's a world tragedy, I always tell people that a world tragedy is a bad day for the world. It's a great day for the news, though, because there's so many things happening. But that does take an emotional toll on you. You can't sit here and talk about, volcanoes blowing up and attacks and all this conflict around the world and not have it take a toll on your mental and emotional state.
I remember as a young broadcaster in radio during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was kind of scary. But we have to take a break.
Okay.
We'll be back with more conversation with Vicky in just 2 minutes. Again, our guest this morning is Vicky Crystal. Vicky is going to be leaving about the end of this month to take on a new career. Vicky, you're going to be taking on a new career as a church pastor.
I am.
And this is new, but I know church has been part of your life for a long time.
It really and truly has. Didn't realize how important it was to me. Like many people, grew up going to church, fell by the wayside. It wasn't until I became a mom that I started to become very active again in the church and learned to do a lot of different things. Became a Sunday school teacher, started learning more about the different boards and committees and community outreaches and things like that. One of the things that I really enjoyed doing, because I'm a talker, I became in the Methodist Church what's known as a certified lay servant. And a certified lay servant is a person who is asked to go out and do sermons if a pastor needs the day off, if they're off to do things. And I always felt that was a very good position for me to be a nice little fill-in.
So you were actually preaching in the Methodist Church. Okay. How did you receive this calling? Was it kind of a gradual thing based on all that, or did one day that you just say, I'm going to work full-time serving God?
It was interesting. So it started with, we were talking about the emotional toll that it can take doing these stories all the time. And I first started feeling that I just didn't know how to make the world a better place. Just my little corner of it, how can you do that? And had a strong feeling that when my contract was up in 2018, this year, that I would probably not re-sign. The original thought was to go into the National Park Service. I have a nephew that works in the Park Service. He said, you'd love it. And that was my thought process at the time. I was taking care of some things before a vacation. I was going to the Grand Canyon with my family and was going over some things with my pastor. And he had said to me as we were finishing up our conversation, he goes, I've been meaning to talk to you about local licensed pastoring. I said, for me? And he's like, yeah, for you. I said, no, I'm a certified lay person. I fill in, that's where I feel I need to be. And we didn't pursue it too much more. And I left, and as I was driving home, it's a 2-mile drive from my house, from my church to my house, I just couldn't shake it. I just got this conviction on me that, you could do this. This is something that is the next step. I went to bed that night knowing that I had to drive to Wisconsin the next day, and instead of thinking about the Grand Canyon of all places, all I can think about is, this is a good move. This is where you need to go. It came on me so strong. I was not anticipating that at all. So I sent an email to my pastor and said, okay, you can send me information, but you can't tell anybody. It's not a done deal. The more I prayed about it, the more it felt like the right thing to be for me. It really and truly did. This wasn't a fly-by-night decision. There was a lot of consideration and prayer and, talk with God back and forth about, is this what you want me to do?
And now you know what your assignment is going to be.
I do. I'm very excited. I heard about mid-May, I met with the people of Crystal Falls and Amasa, so it'll be a dual charge that I'll be starting with them beginning in July. Now, that doesn't mean I can do everything yet. I still have to do what's called the License to Preach course, and so I've got a lot of study ahead of me, but I will begin being a servant to those people in their community, starting up in just a few weeks.
And that it's nice that you're going to a church, to an area that you know.
Yes.
And the people know you as well. That's going to be something.
It is, and it was so nice. I can't imagine what it's like for pastors when they come in and they meet people for the first time and they don't know anybody and they don't, there's no recognition. Right. And I walked through the door and it was like, oh, it's Vicky. It was like, oh, I feel like home. And, Camp Batawagama is right there. And Andrew Lacombe is deeply involved with that, as are many people of the congregation. And so it just felt like not leaving. I'm just shifting home down a little bit.
We have only 30 seconds left, but obviously there'll be some regrets and a lot of joy with this move, I think.
Absolutely.
Right? So you're looking forward to it. What's the most exciting part?
I just want to get my servant towel as dirty as I can.
Well, thanks very much for coming in this morning and talking with us.
Thanks for having me, Don.
People here at TV6 love you, and they're going to miss you, but they also wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
I'll be back with some other thoughts for you about TV in just a couple of minutes. This has been a day for memory, so let me share one more. As a young man, I wanted to be a broadcaster and worked at several area radio stations, but I never had the confidence to apply for a job in television at WLUC-TV. Then one day, fate stepped in. In 1965, the city of Negaunee planned a week-long centennial celebration, and the committee in charge contracted with TV6 to produce a 30-minute film highlighting the week's activities. And to this day, I don't know why they thought of me, but someone from the station called and asked if I would be interested in helping out with that project. To say I was surprised is an understatement, since I had never worked on a film or anything like it. Even though I didn't know what the job would require or if I could actually do it, I said yes. To be working with TV6 in any capacity was like a dream. This was just a temporary part-time assignment, but who knows where it might lead. I would be working with Bruce Sorry, someone I had never met, who was a veteran photographer with TV6. My job was to develop a script that would make the final production look like a complete show when it was done. I would also do some live stand-up segments on camera and record the narration that would tie it all together. For the stand-ups, I would appear in front of that camera and offer some comments that would introduce a particular segment or set the stage for each of the special activities like the major parade or the Miss Negaunee Centennial Pageant. With the type of video equipment that's available today, it would be something I could do at home on my computer, but it was much different back then. We had to work with movie film, sound on film, which, as the name implies, had the soundtrack right on the film. That would include things like my stand-ups or the sounds of the marching bands in the parade. But a lot of the events didn't have appropriate sound to go with them, so Bruce would shoot silent film that could be narrated over later. To make the final production, all the film was edited together. I recorded the narration track to cover the silent film segments, and then it was sent to a lab in Chicago, where they turned it into a film with a complete soundtrack that could be shown on a 16mm projector. You'd be hard-pressed to find one of those today, but 16mm projectors were common for commercial and industrial use back then. So Negaunee had its centennial film, and I had my first experience at putting words and pictures together. But as it turned out, the project would ultimately have a lot more meaning for me. Shortly after it was completed, I applied for a job at TV6. The next thing I knew, I was doing the TV6 early news and weather. I had my dream job, and here we are today. I'll be back in a minute. Well, that's our show for today. Remember to check out UpperMichiganSource.com for the latest news anytime, and you can also catch this show at that same address. Thanks to Vicky Crystal for joining us this morning. She will still be with us for a few more weeks, but we wish her the best in her new career. And thank you for joining us today. Let's make a date to get together again next Sunday morning.